Thank you so much. What an absolute pleasure. And just to add my heartfelt thanks for the last 3 days. It's been phenomenal. I'm already looking forward to watching everybody's presentation again and imagining a book. So I'll just launch right into session 9. I'm absolutely delighted to be moderating this session and really looking forward to the papers. So we are moving to our last presenter now. And just to remind you that you can put your questions in the Q&A or comments in the chat, and if you've any recommendations or sources or anything that come to mind, feel free to share that. But please do put your questions in the Q&A and we'll gather them up at the end. So our fourth speaker this afternoon is Kaitlin Solimine, the postpartum from the Postpartum Production Podcast. She is the Postpartum Production Podcast host, I should say. And the title of Caitlin's paper today is Listening to Voices of Postpartum Experiences. So I'll hand over to you, Kaitlin.
Thank you, Martina, and thank you all of my fellow panelists. I've learned so much today, and thank you to Anna Hennessy also for this incredible symposium and all the organizers. I am not presently a working academic, despite 2 master's degrees, but I am a published novelist and writer. And just as a little bit of background, over 3 years ago, after the birth of my 3rd child, I was just sort of very overtaken by this question of whether or not I was alone in feeling creatively inspired by birth and early postpartum as an artist and as a writer. I decided to begin podcast conversations with other artists in postpartum and in the postpartum journey. And this latest season, season 3, has focused on the intersection of birth, rebirth, and creativity. And so with that in mind, for the presentation today, it's a little bit unconventional, but I'm going to share an audio compilation of voices. So I wanted the contributors and the guests on the podcast to be able to speak for themselves. And I think it will speak to a lot of the topics of the symposium as a whole in today's presentation. So hopefully, let me make sure this works because sometimes the audio sharing can be share sound. Okay, I think I can get this done. Hold on one second. Okay, so that is my podcast page. And I am going to share this, and it's about 16 minutes of compiled audio from this latest season.
This is the only time in my life where I've been so forced to think about what's going on inside of my body. And I kind of wish we were always thinking about that. But I think in pregnancy and postpartum, you're so much more aware because there's an actual being that was inside and then it's outside, and that feeling of emptiness even is so striking. So I think that's what a lot of the work was about very soon after giving birth. A lot of reflections of the sensations of pregnancy, but also the sensations thereafter.
The giving birth, though, I don't think it ends. I think it's a continual thing. Things will continually be created, throughout one's life as one continues to grow.
And even just the language that a person would choose to use about their birth gives you such a window into who has influenced you. Like, what were your options? What did your mom talk to you about birth? Like, there's just so many layers that, yeah, just like you said, are so fascinating that I want to hear from everybody. Because I feel like, writers are good at finding the narrative things within our lives. Like, that's obviously our life's work. We work really hard to learn how to do that. But so many people give birth, and it's this narrative experience that is available to every birthing person of, this is a thing that happened to me that was huge.
There's always that feeling of like, when is the right time to have a baby? And I don't think that there is in probably any profession, but this feels like one where it's very common to feel like afraid to do it because you're going to set yourself back or like remove yourself from the conversation, and anything you can do to like not do that is so beneficial. And for me, that's been creating my own things. But I've in the past had moments of resentment against that idea where it's like, you have to be doing all your own stuff if you want anything to happen, because it's not true for everyone. But I do feel like it's more and more the case in this field.
but adding context, and particularly for poets of color and then poets of color who are women, we're left out of the archive often. So, you're just creating context for these lives and people that had extraordinary incidences happen in their lives, but also, that raised us. So that to me was like the work of the thing.
So I think I've become a lot more productive with my time. And also, this is fiction. So nothing in here actually happened, but it all like kind of happened. I do write about myself. I don't imagine very well. So kids are just like an endless supply of things to write about. And so many conversations with little kids that aren't metaphors as they're happening can easily be a metaphor when you start writing about it. And then also, it's very interesting to see the ways that friends parent and how our friendships have changed, or choices they're making, or choices I'm making. So that kind of stuff, it changes relationships in such an interesting way that this book it's really interested in those kinds of changes that all have to do with having a kid.
Purpose can be seen in very different ways and pursued in very different ways. As much as I love dance, it's one of the biggest things that I will always have in my life. Bringing a human being to Earth, it's so magical. You are designing life, you are educating life, you are teaching them the do's and don'ts of life. But I think also having the experience of almost losing what you love, but finding a different purpose in it, it can shift everything.
So this is called Ode to Estrogen. Estrogen, your lissome slink and feral howl, your honeycomb of mad impulse. I carefully peel back the adhesive, apply the translucent moon to my upper thigh. Neruda was 20 when he wrote his 20 love songs and a song of despair. 20, the age, give or take, of my ex-husband's new fiancé. Everyone loves estrogen, the midwife assures me, writing a prescription. When Neruda writes, the light wraps you in its mortal flame. When he writes, you look like a world lying in surrender. What he means is, I love you, estrogen. Before he broke up with me last week, the Turkish mathematician told me the tide of our passion had ebbed. Estrogen, see ire, see oxygen. The midwife promised no side effects, but the swell of my sobs beat against his sea-wall. How we clash like Greek gods, with great force and without dignity. The estrogen flows directly into my bloodstream, a gadfly sent by Hera to torment Io. When Neruda writes, ¿Quién eres tú? ¿Quién eres? Oh, estrogen, wrap me in your mortal flame a little longer.
But this was like a lack of control that I completely was at peace with and invited, because I knew, in the end what it was doing. And it was just so amazing. I mean, there was definitely a horror movie element to all of this, like all of the blood, all of these crazy contractions, these crazy convulsions definitely reminded me of different horror movies and of the monstrous feminine, which is this thing that's really been a preoccupation of mine in my work, and equating the feminine and the monstrous and how that can be this major sign of strength and reclamation of female agency.
Once I got past the initial shock, then I felt like I found this new courage, this new kind of force that I didn't know I had, because I think everything that had been told to me about the birth experience was how much it was going to hurt me and how much it was going to possibly injure or kill me, that I would be lucky to get out of it unscathed. I think that was like the vibe I had going into birth. And then actually in the birth of my older daughter, which was a very fast, very dramatic and intense natural birth, I remember looking into my husband's eyes and seeing pure fear, like awe and fear and like, whoa, and feeling like that is the correct response
And that is a place where I've stayed for a long time. Like, that is what I'm capable of, this awesome power. That sounds crazy to say out loud, but that is how I felt. The creative process for me is an attempt to do what my body did in pregnancy with the part of me in my head. And then the part of me that's my body, because that's also on stage. But when your brain can take a quote, a movement, a piece of music, an idea, a feeling, and put them together and they turn into something, that is magical.
I mean, I think every time we sit down at the blank page, it's the type of birth, right? I mean, we're pulling something into existence that wasn't there before. So there's definitely that piece. And then taking these individual poems or these individual pieces of poems and pulling them together to create this larger whole is a whole other type of birth and creation. And sort of similar to parenting young people and giving birth to young people, it also doesn't stop there, right? It's like the poems and the book, they go out into the world and then they suddenly have this life of their own, much like our young people will as they transition into the world themselves.
I was exhausted. I had 2 kids, a 2-year-old and a baby. They were with me pretty much all the time. I was very tired, but I still felt this spark of creativity, excitement, and energy that I can't really explain other than to say that it was directly related to them and to being a mother, and then infused itself with my intellectual interests.
What that meant was I then had the equipment necessary to honestly have the gall to look at birth not only as what did it mean to me or what does it mean to my friend, but to think about it as a site from which to ask questions of who has power, what do these changes over time or these practices reveal about relative power or value, or whose kinds of knowledge is considered legible and real and whose isn't, and what do the ways that we use technology, for instance, demonstrate about that.
Midlife crises are funny. I don't feel I had a midlife crisis. I feel I had a midlife rebirth where I just decided the most fun, amazing, exciting thing that I can do right now is go to medical school. It's in my heart. I feel like I get to be a new person. I get to live 2 lives. I have lived as an artist, and now I will have lived as a doctor. So I have given birth to an entirely new person. And I just think it's fun. I get to experience life twice. And I think that's what a midlife reimagining and revisioning should be all about.
I just felt really on fire creatively and intellectually. Despite all the sleep deprivation, I felt a really strong desire to understand what was going on, because at times I was finding it so difficult that I needed to work out for my own psychological survival whether that made me a bad mum or if there was something fundamentally wrong with me, that I wasn't enjoying every minute, or that I couldn't seem to feed well, or I couldn't soothe my very colicky child, or the feeling rules, to use Arlie Hochschild's term. Then the norms around maternal subjectivity felt incredibly trapping and oppressive. So there was an element of survival to writing it. And how did I write it? I mean, I think that I was obsessed with the subject. A lot of that, I think, was fueled with a kind of cold rage of feeling that the institution of motherhood in so many ways was taking advantage of women around me across race and class lines and socioeconomic lines, and in so many different areas, in terms of maternity care, in terms of going back to work, all sorts of, there's so many structures in the institution which need improvement. So it was almost not an option for this not to be a subject. So I think about giving birth and natality as something that we can all do every day, like a power of natality that we have which is never ending, and that it's possible every day to give birth to something new. And what have I given birth to? I don't know. I mean, yes, the books and the babies, but I spend a lot of time outside, and I feel that natality and giving birth is a condition of being alive. Every time we breathe, we are giving birth to some kind of microorganisms. And I suppose that philosophically or intellectually, that's exciting to me, because I don't believe that the structures and systems that we live in today are natural, or we take them as a given that it has to be like this. And I don't believe that's true. And I think when I look out and I look at the natality of the world, it's empowering, and it shows how things can change and new things can be birthed. I just have a strong belief in that. New movements, new ways of being, new ways of thinking, and new language is so much part of that.
And in terms of care, I think we're not really talking about how transformative care can be if a person is supported, if they have the space to do that, that's actually a really powerful and transformative experience for men and for women. And that's not to say people should do that and necessarily it will always be like that, but it can be like that. And God knows we need more of that energy and that learning than we need people going out and making more spreadsheet models stuff. That kind of learning that's really deep and personal and intimate and nuanced, that's really valuable. And instead we just try and turn it into, well, how can we make this the most cost effective and provide a higher level of care, but just institutionalize it and whatnot. It's threatening to talk about it as something that is really personal and intimate, because does that mean that you should then quit your job and go do that? Not necessarily, but how can you fold that awareness into it, that it can be this really powerful thing, not only for the child, but for the caregiver themselves and for our understanding of what matters in community and in society, all of that. And for living in community, which I think all of us want a lot more of, and we're not getting when we're isolating all of these things in their own institution, where you go to work and your kid is over here and everything is in its little silo. We're missing that too.
I don't want it to be that because I had this unmedicated home birth, that wasn't my goal. My goal was to feel supported and to feel empowered. And so how she was born and all of it didn't it did matter. Obviously, I wanted her to be healthy, but what specific journey that took mattered less to me. I knew I had done the work. I had the knowledge. I had done the body work. I had done the spiritual work. I did all of that so that I just felt okay. I didn't feel scared. I just felt like I knew that everyone around me was there and would support me. But I guess what I'm saying is that the point for me isn't how the baby's born. It isn't like hospital, home, vaginal, but it's how you feel through that. And honestly, really, who's with you? And I think that that's a part of the cultural narrative that we've totally lost. Each child is so different and so unique that the things that you think you can do, whether it comes to birth or parenting with one, the same rules do not apply. And so unlearning and relearning and all of that, I felt like was a really positive thing for me individually, just as a human, because I think had I had only the first, for whatever reason, it was a fairly easy process for me with understanding who she was, whereas this felt different. And so I think it was a necessary humbling, I guess, in terms of just teaching me that, no, I really don't know what I'm doing, and that's okay. The more that we share birth stories, the more that we feel connected to these lineages that are so deeply ancestral and powerful, and that we all have that within us, no matter what that particular birth process or outcome looks like. But the most important thing is to really feel truly supported and truly powerful. Okay. So that concludes that part of the presentation. And I just wanted to add a little addendum to that, which is that you may have heard our own Anna Hennessy's voice, if you recognized it in there. She was a guest this season. And you heard from an incredible range of artists and mothers who are poets and dancers and actresses, musicians, the whole gamut. So I thank you for listening, and would love to also feature anyone's voices here that are interested in future seasons. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Kaitlin, for that. That was, yeah, I feel we should take a moment. There were so many voices coming. It was absolutely incredible. All of the presentations have been amazing.